Hi, I'm Daz. I'm the producer of The Drift. I'm also the director of The Drift. And the aim of this video is to sort of talk about score, not only in terms of what score's about generally in movies, but specifically what sort of score I'm looking for in this film, and for anybody who might be interested in helping out in creating that score. Now, we've already got some volunteers and they're already throwing a few things my way, which is really good. Certainly appreciating that and looking to put those into the scenes as they're coming along, just to see how it fits and where we go from there. But I thought it would only be sort of fair and, to be honest, right to sort of give some sort of direction in terms of what I'm sort of looking for. So before I do that, let's sort of talk about the actual reason for score and what score is going to achieve in the film. And the way I look at a music score, because it can come in, I suppose, sort of two main ways. One would just be a song in the background. Lots of 80s films do that, and certainly more films aimed for younger people, like teenagers and stuff, who often have a music soundtrack of tracks that can then be sold as an album and all the rest of it, and that's great. Science fiction generally, though, doesn't do that. Generally, science fiction is the traditional score, as in instrumental music, and there's so many different ways of writing music, etc., that I'm not going to start saying what's good and what's bad. But for me, a score is very much as a part of storytelling as much as what you see and the other things that you hear in terms of dialogue and sound effects, stuff like that. A score can, in some ways, save a scene. It can misdirect the audience deliberately. It can make the audience jump. It can indicate to the audience what the audience should be feeling, insofar as the director's intent. So if it's sad and poignant moment in the movie, then the music, the score, can reflect that. Sometimes a lack of score, knowing when not to have music, is just as important, because either you want to add an element of reality, or for when the score does come back into the film, it has a greater sort of magnitude. So there's a lot to music in a film. Traditionally, not traditionally, but certainly back in the old days, in the golden age of cinema, I've seen some old films, classic black and white movies, where there's pretty much music through the entire thing. That was very much, I suppose, a sort of a fashion and a sort of experiment in the evolution of score. Now, in more recent films, it's tended to have gone the other way. A lot of films have a very small score, just little bits here and there. Not always the way. I mean, there were some great examples, recent examples, Gladiator, Pirates of the Caribbean, that have, and any Danny Elfman, to be honest, every time he writes music, is always loads of stuff that are quite grand. And probably in the 70s and the 80s was probably perhaps the sort of the heyday of dramatic score. John Williams, James Horner, those sort of big themed scores. So Superman, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, Star Trek. Those movies would all have recognisable themes that if you just heard in isolation, you would know what they were talking about. So there's definitely been a sort of evolution in score. So in terms of this film, then, in terms of The Drift, what am I looking for? Well, the film is set away from civilization. It's in a graveyard of spaceships. We have a crew that visits that, and we know that the galaxy is not a particularly wonderful place. Graveyards aren't generally the most pleasant of environments, whether they're on Earth or floating in nebulas or in the darkest areas of space. So, and there aren't many people, although there's quite a large cast, perhaps 10, 11 people in terms of cast. They are the only people. They're not, say, 3 people in New York. The film has less characters in it, but it's in a city of 9 million people. So the score should reflect that. So in terms of what I'm looking for sort of instrumentation or sort of style, would be minimalist. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it can't have a tune, but it's certainly in terms of the number of instruments that You know, you don't need to have lots and lots of instruments playing big sort of orchestral type stuff. Now, there are some elements in the movie that do require that. I'm not going to say where they are on this video because that would give this too much away, as this is a public video. But certainly, you know, in terms of styles that I've sort of looked at already, I started off with the Alien movies as a sort of, literally as a starting point. Alien 3 in particular. Again, it's the sort of the chopping, thunderous moments. There's a lot of music in Alien 3 and in all of them, to be honest, all of the Alien movies, where it doesn't sound like music, it sounds like something being hit, or sort of bangs and clanks and sort of scary noises, but it is still part of the score. I don't see the need to have, say, lots of instruments, and you know, you can have a very effective violin piece, and in some of the temp cuts that you'll have access to, those that are working on the film, you'll be able to sort of see the temp tracks that I've already put in there, and see how some of it is actually quite small. I want it to be small. I want it to be lonely, and then when there are occasions when it isn't perhaps so lonely, you can ramp it up with extra instruments. So I think that's certainly a sort of starting point. The other thing is that those of you who will be listening or watching the temporary cuts with the temp tracks in them, I haven't just found a score from Alien 3 or Gladiator or The Road. I just plonked it in there. I've edited the tracks first and foremost, so they actually I've chosen bits within a track that I particularly like, or combined several tracks together. And it isn't necessarily so much about the tune or even the instrument. It's about the feeling. What is the music making me feel? Because the music should echo the feeling of what you're watching. So if the crew are running through a corridor, then the music needs to reflect that. If there's lots of people running through a corridor versus one person running through a corridor, you know, if there's a fight scene, again, you know, what's happening, fists swaying and all that kind of stuff, you know, so how many instruments do you need for that, and what sort of instruments? I think what I'll do is, once, you know, you guys have sort of seen this video, is then go into more specific private videos and discussion as to what we're really looking for specific to the scenes. This is just a sort of general broad brush overview, and for those who are not even involved in it, sort of have an idea of what we're looking at when it comes to score. There are some kind of deal breakers though in terms of what I really don't want to have, and it's a difficult one in particular, my first sort of main deal breaker, because I understand that we don't all have orchestras in our backyards, and we don't have composers and a whole woodwind section just sat there waiting to play our compositions. But what I would say is that things I certainly don't want to have are overly synthesized sounds. I don't want to have sort of drums, and as in pop drums, you know, where it sounds like someone's hitting a drum. There are different types of drums which I love. I mean, and Battlestar Galactica, the new reimagined Battlestar Galactica Alien, tribal drumming is very effective, and that's not what I'm talking about. In fact, on quite the contrary, that's something that would be good. But although the film is set in the future, and there is a connection to Earth because these people are from Earth, etc. The galaxy in the future is not a good place. So I think it's appropriate that you know, the instrumentation should kind of reflect that. So any sort of post-apocalyptic movies, Book of Eli, The Road, are sort of good sort of starting points to look at the score that they've produced, and certainly looking at when they decide to use more orchestra versus less and all that kind of thing. You know, long notes and that, keeping it simple. It's creating a feeling rather than creating a tune. That sounds a bit simplistic, but it's not about just having to have a you know, complex arrangement of music coming in and all this clever stuff. You want the audience to kind of ignore the music, but absorb the feeling of the music because what they really should be watching is the characters. It's like the sets. You know, we spend months and months and months making these sets, and most of the shots are tight on the frame of the face. But once the audience has seen the set on a wide, they've got it. They know where they are now, and now it's time to dwell, you know, concentrate on the action, on the characters, and the story. It's the same with the music. That, you know, they don't need to be blown away by wonderful tunes. They need to be guided by the score. So yeah, they're just sort of a few sort of initial thoughts on the score. What I'll do, like I say, is I'll do some private videos for specifics, you know, which I suppose when the film is released I'll push those out online as well, but for now they'll have to stay within the team. But there you go. Score's a really big deal. I don't underestimate the importance of a good score and the hard work that goes into it as well. I think for those of you who are looking to help out and who already are helping, you need to communicate quite frequently and send me lots of stuff, temp stuff and ideas and inspiration, and then we'll engage and go from there. But there we go.